Hey everyone, this is Karenology. You won't believe what happened this time. Let's dive into another wild and dramatic story.
I've lived in this neighborhood for over 15 years. It's not fancy, but it's home. We have a small but beautiful community park where kids play, veterans gather, and elderly folks take their daily walks. It's the kind of place that holds memories for people. And up until a few months ago, no one had a problem with it. That was before the new luxury development opened right next to us. Big houses, private security, and of course, an homeowner association that acts like they own the whole town. At first, we just heard rumors. Some of the new homeowners complained that the park was an eyesore and attracted the wrong kind of people. I ignored it, thinking it was just typical snobbery. But then, an official announcement arrived in the mail. A meeting would be held to discuss the future of the park. That's when I knew things were about to get bad. I knocked on Tony's cafe door where he was closing up for the evening. "Did you get this?" I asked, holding up the letter. He sighed. "Yeah, they're up to something, aren't they?" We both knew the answer. The meeting was held at the Homeowner Association's brand new clubhouse, a building so polished and exclusive it might as well have had a red carpet. The moment I walked in, I felt out of place. Most of the people there were from the new development, polished, well-dressed, sipping expensive bottled water. Then there was the rest of us, longtime residents who actually used the park. I could see Mary Ann, the retired journalist, taking notes, and Rick Foster, the veteran, standing with his arms crossed, already scowling at the podium. Some of the newer residents gave us sidelong glances as if we didn't belong there. The head of the Homeowner Association, Karen Wilson, stood at the podium. She was exactly what you'd expect. Blonde, a floral blouse, and the kind of smile that wasn't friendly, just rehearsed. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice smooth but firm. "We're here to discuss a plan that will enhance our community." I exchanged looks with Tony, who leaned over and whispered, "Enhance? That's code for takeover." I nodded. We both knew what was coming. Karen continued. "The Homeowner Association has received numerous complaints about the park, concerns about safety, property values, and the overall aesthetic of our neighborhood." She smiled as if she was doing us all a favor. "We are proposing a redevelopment plan to create a more exclusive recreational space, a private club that will better serve the community." The murmurs in the room grew louder. "A private club?" someone scoffed. "You mean tearing down the park?" another neighbor added. Karen raised her hands, pretending to calm things down. "We understand your concerns, but we have to consider what's best for everyone." I stood up. "Who exactly is everyone? Because it sounds like you mean the people in your homeowner association, not the rest of us." Karen didn't even blink. "We conducted a survey among the homeowners of the new development, and the majority support this plan." I crossed my arms. "What about the rest of us? The people who have lived here long before your homeowner association even existed?" She kept that fake smile. "Unfortunately, the park is technically on land that can be repurposed if deemed underutilized. According to legal reviews conducted by our attorney, the city has options to rezone the space." That's when it hit me. They weren't just trying to take the park. They were making it look like it was legally justifiable. Tony jumped in. "Underutilized? That park is full of people every single day. You know that, Karen." She gave a small shrug. "Our data suggests otherwise." "Whose data?" "Yours," Mary Ann called out, holding up her notepad. "Because I'd love to see it." Karen ignored her and continued. "There will be additional discussions before anything is finalized, and we encourage you all to keep an open mind." Rick, who had been silent the whole time, suddenly stepped forward. "This isn't about safety or aesthetics. This is about you wanting to push out the old neighborhood for the sake of your overpriced housing project." The room went silent. Karen's smile faltered, just for a second before she regained her composure. "I assure you, Mr. Foster, we have the best intentions for everyone." As the meeting ended, Karen made her final statement. This is not a final decision, but we urge the community to consider what's best for the future. More details will be shared soon." I walked out with Tony and Mary Ann, my head spinning. "They've already made up their minds," I muttered. "They're just making it look like they haven't." Mary Ann nodded. "This isn't over. They're up to something bigger. We need to fight back." She was right. This was just the beginning, and if we didn't act fast, our park, and everything it represented, would be gone forever. As we stood outside, more neighbors gathered, whispering among themselves. Some were clearly angry, while others looked unsure, worried about going up against an homeowner association with deep pockets. Rick exhaled sharply. "They think they can steamroll us. They don't know who they're messing with." Tony nodded. "We need to organize. Fast. They've already got their paperwork in motion. If we don't push back now, we'll wake up one morning to bulldozers." Mary Ann adjusted her glasses. "I'll start digging into their financials and connections. Homeowner associations don't operate in a vacuum. There's always someone pulling the strings." I nodded. "I'll talk to the city council, see if we have any legal footing." Tony added, "And I'll start getting signatures. If we can show enough opposition, they'll have a fight on their hands." The battle for our park had just begun, and it was going to be a long one. The morning after the meeting, I woke up still feeling that gnawing sense of unease. Homeowner association meetings were usually frustrating, but this was different. This wasn't just about parking violations or mailbox colors. This was an attempt to erase something that had been part of our community for years. As I stepped out onto my porch with a cup of coffee, I saw Tony locking up his cafe. He looked up and waved me over. "You talked to anyone yet?" he asked, rubbing his face. "Yeah, a few neighbors. Some are fired up, but others think fighting the homeowner association is a lost cause." Tony scoffed. "That's exactly what they want us to think. If they can make people feel powerless, they win before the fight even starts." Mary Ann had already started her research. She called me around noon. "I've been digging into the city zoning records. The land was designated for public use over 50 years ago. If the homeowner association wants to change that, they'll need more than just a fancy speech." I let out a breath of relief. "So we have a legal argument?" Mary Ann hesitated. "Not quite. The city council has the power to approve rezoning if they claim it benefits the community, and if homeowner association pushes their exclusive club narrative hard enough, they might just get what they want. Rick was already talking to people in the park when I got there. "We need to show that people actually use this place," he said, arms crossed as he surveyed the playground, the jogging paths, and the shaded benches where retirees played chess. "They're saying it's underutilized. We need proof that's a lie." We started taking pictures, making notes of how many people were in the park throughout the day. It felt absurd having to prove something so obvious, but this was the game Homeowner Association wanted to play, so we had no choice but to play it smart. A few parents volunteered to write statements about how often they brought their kids to play, while the veterans who gathered for their morning coffee agreed to sign a petition. A few days later, Homeowner Association started showing their hand. Tony's cafe suddenly got a visit from a health inspector. "A surprise inspection. Can you believe that?" he told me, furious as he threw his apron down. "I've run this place for 10 years without a single issue, and now, out of nowhere, I'm a public health hazard?" Mary Ann sighed. "They're going after anyone who speaks out. They want to make examples of us." Tony clenched his jaw. "Let them try. I'm not backing down." That same evening, 2 more businesses on our street received sudden zoning violation notices. It was clear the homeowner association was flexing their power. Meanwhile, Karen and her people were spreading their version of the story. Flyers appeared in mailboxes, warning residents about the declining conditions of the park, claiming it attracted loiterers and vandalism. One flyer even had a staged photo of overturned trash cans and graffiti. "They're manufacturing a problem," I said, staring at the paper in my hand. "They're setting the stage for their argument." Rick exhaled sharply. "Then we need to set the stage for ours." We started talking to the local press. A small community newspaper agreed to run a story about the park and the Homeowner Association's push to take it over. We got statements from parents, veterans, and seniors who relied on the space. Tony even got a reporter to visit the cafe and interview locals about what was happening. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Then, Mary Ann managed to track down a city official willing to speak on record about the Homeowner Association's aggressive tactics, hinting at potential corruption within the council. Then things got personal. A neighbor, Sienna, who had been vocal about keeping the park, got a letter from the Homeowner Association threatening fines over her overgrown lawn. She looked exhausted when she came to my house, holding the letter with shaking hands. "I mow my lawn every week. This is punishment, isn't it?" I nodded. "They want to scare people into silence." Sienna looked away. "It's working. I can't afford fines. I have 2 kids to take care of." I placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone in this. We'll figure it out." That same night, someone egged Tony's cafe windows. "They want us to back off," he muttered as he cleaned up the mess. "Guess what? That just means we're getting to them." The final straw came when we caught them in the act. Late one night, Mary Ann and I were driving past the park when we noticed movement. Flashlights flickering near the picnic area. We parked a block away and approached quietly. 3 men were tipping over trash cans, breaking branches, spray painting walls. "You seeing what I'm seeing?" Mary Ann whispered. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "They're trying to make the place look bad. They want evidence that the park is a problem." One of the men turned and my stomach dropped. It was one of Karen's close associates from the Homeowner Association meetings. "We need to go public with this," Mary Ann whispered. "Now." We sent the footage to every news outlet we could think of. The next morning, it was all over social media. "Caught red-handed, Homeowner Association-linked vandals destroy public park." The narrative was shifting, and for the first time since this fight began, I felt like we had the upper hand. But something told me Karen wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning of their desperation. The fallout from the video was immediate. By morning, the footage of Homeowner Association-linked vandals destroying the park was spreading across social media like wildfire. Local news stations picked up the story, and within hours, residents from both our neighborhood and the new development were calling for an explanation. Karen and her Homeowner Association board scrambled to control the narrative, releasing a carefully worded statement claiming that they had no knowledge of the individuals involved and that they do not condone any illegal activity. But it was too late. The damage was done. Calls flooded City Hall, demanding that the upcoming rezoning hearing be postponed until an investigation into the Homeowner Association's practices was conducted. A few council members hinted they might reconsider their stance, but it wasn't enough. Karen wasn't backing down. Tony's cafe was busier than ever that day, filled with neighbors exchanging updates, theorizing about what the Homeowner Association's next move might be. Mary Ann sat in the corner, typing furiously on her laptop. "The City Council is set to review the park rezoning next week," she said, barely looking up. "I just got confirmation that at least 2 members are considering withdrawing their support for the Homeowner Association's proposal. This scandal put them in a tough spot. They don't want to be associated with corruption." Rick leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "So they're scared." "Good. But Karen isn't just going to give up. She'll double down." Less than an hour later, we saw the first signs of retaliation. Homeowner Association members were going door to door in the new development, handing out glossy pamphlets that framed the video as a misunderstanding and accused our neighborhood of fanning the flames of division. They still tried to push the same tired narrative, that the park was unsafe, that it brought in outsiders, that property values were at risk. But now, fewer people were buying into it. The video had changed things. Some newer residents who had previously stayed silent started questioning the Homeowner Association's tactics. A few of them even stopped by the cafe, cautiously asking about what was really happening. That night, Tony, Mary Ann, Rick, and I sat in my living room, surrounded by printed emails, legal documents, and a growing list of community supporters. "We need more than just public outrage," Mary Ann said, adjusting her glasses. "We need something that legally forces them to back off." I nodded. "So, what's our best shot?" She pushed a stack of papers toward me. "The environmental angle. If we can get the city to recognize that the park has ecological value, protected wildlife, endangered plant species, rezoning it for development will be nearly impossible." Rick tapped the table. "I know a guy, retired environmental scientist. He used to do assessments for the state. If there's anything worth protecting in that park, he'll find it." It was worth a shot. The next morning, we met with the scientist, an older man named Dr. Ellis, who spent hours walking the park, taking soil samples, and noting plant species. By the time he was done, he looked almost excited. "You folks might just have something here," he said. "There's a protected wetland species growing along the lower edge of the park. If my analysis confirms it, this area qualifies for environmental protection. That means the city can't rezone it." It felt like we had finally found our silver bullet. But just as hope started rising, we got word that Karen had requested an emergency homeowner association meeting. The timing was too convenient. Something was coming. That evening, a new notice landed in mailboxes across the neighborhood. A formal complaint had been filed against several outspoken residents: Tony, Mary Ann, Rick, Sienna, and me. The document accused us of disrupting community harmony, defamation against homeowner association leadership, and coordinating misinformation campaigns. Tony read his copy aloud, shaking his head. "Are they serious? They're accusing us of defamation when we literally have video proof of their people trashing the park?" Rick slammed his fist on the table. "They're just trying to intimidate us. They know they're losing." Mary Ann rubbed her temples. "That's exactly it. They're desperate. But this is still a legal filing. If they push hard enough, we might end up in court, and even if it's baseless, it'll drain our time and resources." Sienna looked worried. "What if some people believe them? The new residents don't know us. They might actually think we're just stirring up trouble." I sighed. "Then we make sure they hear the truth. We hold a town hall, invite the media, get Dr. Ellis to present his findings. If we let them control the narrative, we lose." Tony leaned forward. "And we need to push harder online. If this scandal is big enough, the city won't be able to ignore it." Mary Ann nodded. "I'll reach out to reporters, see if anyone's willing to cover the Homeowner Association's intimidation tactics." The decision was made. We would take our fight public in a way Karen couldn't spin. We would rally our neighbors, expose the Homeowner Association's bullying, and make sure that by the time the city council met, they wouldn't dare approve the rezoning. But deep down, I had a feeling this battle was far from over. If we thought Karen and the Homeowner Association were ruthless before, we hadn't seen anything yet. I knew they were already working on their next move, and whatever it was, we had to be ready. By the next morning, the tension in the neighborhood had thickened to the point where even a casual glance between neighbors carried weight. People who had once exchanged friendly nods were now hesitant, watching each other as if trying to decide where their loyalties lay. The Homeowner Association's influence was stretching further, and I could feel the invisible divide forming between those who sided with them and those who didn't. Tony had already opened his cafe early, and when I stepped inside, I could see the exhaustion on his face. I got 2 more emails from the Homeowner Association overnight, more vague threats, something about property violations and how business owners must maintain a standard of professionalism. They're grasping at straws. Mary Ann was at her usual spot by the window, laptop open, typing furiously. I managed to get a response from one of the city council members. He says the pressure on them is mounting, but they're still considering the rezoning proposal. The Homeowner Association is using their influence to sway votes behind the scenes. If we don't present something definitive, we could still lose. Rick sat down with a heavy sigh. The problem is, Homeowner Association members are talking to the newer residents, spinning their own version of events. They're claiming we're the aggressors, that we're the ones making the neighborhood unstable. A few people have already backed off from our fight because they don't want trouble. I ran a hand over my face. We need to make this bigger than just our neighborhood. If we can get enough outside attention, they won't be able to contain it. We have the video. We have Dr. Ellis's preliminary findings on the environmental angle. We need to hit them from all sides. Sienna arrived not long after, looking more determined than I had seen her in weeks. I got a call from a reporter from the local news station. They want to do a segment on the park controversy. If we can get them to cover this, the Homeowner Association won't be able to hide behind their closed meetings. They'll have to answer publicly. Tony leaned forward. Then let's make it happen. We need to organize a public meeting, invite the press, bring in Dr. Ellis, and have people from the neighborhood tell their stories. If we let Karen and her people keep shaping the narrative, we'll lose control of it. We immediately started reaching out to everyone we knew, parents who brought their kids to the park, retirees who met there for morning walks, high schoolers who used the basketball courts. We needed voices, real stories that couldn't be dismissed as exaggeration. The following evening, we gathered in the park. A makeshift stage had been set up near the gazebo, and despite the cold wind, a crowd had already formed. Parents stood with their children. Elderly residents who had been in the neighborhood for decades sat on benches, watching with quiet determination. The reporters were there, cameras ready, and the energy in the air was undeniable. The Homeowner Association board members lingered at the edges, Karen standing with arms crossed, eyes scanning the crowd. She had brought a few of her more vocal supporters, people who had moved into the development recently and who were quick to call anything progress as long as it benefited them. Rick stepped forward first, his voice calm but firm. This park has been a part of our community for generations. It's not just a piece of land. It's a place where memories are made, where people come together. And now, a handful of people who weren't even here 5 years ago think they can take it away. We won't stand for it. The crowd clapped, a few cheers rising from the back. Marianne had handed out flyers with bullet points about the legal implications of rezoning, and I could see people reading them, nodding, their resolve strengthening. Dr. Ellis followed, holding up a folder. I've conducted an environmental assessment of this park, and I have found evidence of protected plant species growing in its lower areas. If the city approves rezoning, they will be violating environmental protections. I will be filing an official petition with the state to ensure this land remains protected. That got the reporters' attention. Cameras zoomed in, microphones thrust forward. Karen's expression tightened. The crowd murmured, and Karen, who had been standing with a few Homeowner Association members near the back, crossed her arms tightly. The reporters took notes, cameras flashing as neighbors cheered. But we all knew this wasn't over. Karen was already whispering to her board members, her eyes cold and calculating. She wasn't giving up, and neither were we. The real fight was just beginning. Then, just as the meeting was wrapping up, a voice from the back of the crowd cut through the applause. I don't understand why you people are fighting this. A tall man in a pressed suit stepped forward. The Homeowner Association isn't your enemy. We're just trying to make this neighborhood better. This park could be so much more. I recognized him from the Homeowner Association meetings. Daniel Prentice, one of the newer members who had aligned himself with Karen early on. He gestured around. Think about it. A new facility, private, maintained, with amenities. Isn't that better than an old, unkept park? Murmurs rippled through the crowd, but before anyone could answer, an elderly woman stepped forward. Better for who? Her voice was steady but strong. I've been walking this park every morning for 20 years. You think we need a private club? What we need is for you to leave what isn't yours alone. The crowd erupted into applause again, and Daniel's confident expression faltered. Karen pulled him back before he could say anything more. She wasn't going to risk losing the little control she had left in a public debate. As people dispersed, I saw Karen get into a quiet but clearly heated discussion with two of the other board members. She knew she had lost this round, but I could tell she was already planning her next move. We had won the night, but the war wasn't over. If anything, this battle had just begun. The morning after the public meeting, the energy in the neighborhood had shifted. People were still cautious, still waiting for whatever retaliation the Homeowner Association had planned. But for the first time in weeks, there was a sense that we had a fighting chance. Tony was outside his cafe early, wiping down the tables, but he looked up when he saw me approaching. "Heard anything yet?" he asked, tossing the rag over his shoulder. "Not yet, but it's too quiet. Karen's up to something, we just don't know what yet." Mary Ann arrived minutes later, her phone in hand, shaking her head. "I just got word from someone at City Hall. The Homeowner Association has filed an appeal with the zoning board. They're trying to override the environmental argument by claiming the plant species isn't actually protected. They're bringing in their own consultant to dispute Dr. Ellis's findings." Rick, who had just joined us, exhaled sharply. "So, now they're trying to rewrite science? Typical." I clenched my jaw. "Then we fight back. We get Dr. Ellis to double-check his data. We find another expert. We make sure our case is airtight. They can't just make facts disappear because they don't like them." Sienna arrived, clutching her laptop. "And we don't stop at just science. I've been digging deeper into the Homeowner Association's financials, and guess what? There are payments from a private developer, the same company that's been trying to buy land in this area for months. They're backing Karen and the Homeowner Association." Tony whistled. "That's a game changer. If we can connect the dots, we don't just stop the rezoning, we expose the entire scheme." We spent the next 2 days gathering everything we could. Mary Ann worked on the media angle, making sure journalists had the latest developments. Rick and I went door to door, rallying more residents, ensuring they were ready to show up when it mattered. Meanwhile, Sienna and Dr. Ellis were compiling irrefutable evidence that the Homeowner Association was manipulating facts to suit their agenda. As expected, Karen didn't sit back. Flyers began appearing in mailboxes, warning residents about activists trying to sabotage the community's progress. The language was carefully crafted, making it sound as if we were radicals trying to hold back development. It was a desperate move, but an effective one. Some of the newer residents started looking at us differently, questioning our motives. The night before the zoning board hearing, Tony's Cafe became our unofficial headquarters. "Tomorrow's the day," Rick said, leaning against the counter. "We go in prepared, we don't let them twist the facts, and we don't back down." Sienna tapped her laptop. "I've got every document printed and backed up. We're ready." Mary Ann exhaled. "Let's just hope the board listens to reason." The next morning, we arrived early at City Hall. The Homeowner Association members were already there, sitting in a neat row, Karen in the middle, her expression unreadable. The meeting started, and one by one we presented our case. Dr. Ellis spoke about the environmental impact, laying out undeniable evidence. Sienna revealed the connection between the Homeowner Association and the developer, showing financial records that made even the board members shift uncomfortably in their seats. Rick spoke about the history of the park, about what it meant to the community. And then it was Karen's turn. She stood, her voice calm, measured. "This isn't about money or control. It's about creating a better future for our residents. We are simply trying to improve our neighborhood." But this time, no one was buying it. The board asked tough questions, pressing her on the financial ties. The more she spoke, the more defensive she became. Finally, after hours of deliberation, the board made their decision. The rezoning request was denied. The park would remain untouched. A wave of relief washed over the room, neighbors embracing, some even cheering quietly. Karen and her Homeowner Association board left without a word, their carefully crafted plan crumbling before them. That evening, the park was filled with people, parents, kids, elderly residents. It was a celebration. Tony handed out free coffee, Mary Ann was deep in conversation with a reporter, and Rick stood beside me watching the sunset. "We did it," he said. "Yeah, we did." But as I looked around, I couldn't shake the feeling that Karen wasn't done. This battle was over, but something told me she wasn't the kind to walk away without trying one last trick. I pushed the thought aside, just for tonight. We had won, and that was worth celebrating.